Good afternoon. Welcome to our STS-107 post-launch press briefing with NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe. We'll take a few comments from the Administrator and then we'll go to questions. We don't have much time today, but we'll go ahead with the briefing.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for being here. This was a historic day in the sense that this is the first time I've ever noticed in the time that I've been privileged to be part of NASA here in a year that the probability of launch was described in positive terms. Right before the launch occurred, it was described by the senior leadership here as a 95% probability of go. A year ago, I'd always heard it referred to as what is the percentage probability of no-go. So there's a dispositional change that's occurred that I found most historic here today. Certainly beyond that, the most historic features, I think, of what's occurred here is a science mission that's dedicated to 80 different science research objectives that we've seen. And it's been 18 months in the making here in preparation for this particular flight. 7 extraordinary crew members who are not only well versed in all of the pieces and mechanics of what that science agenda will call for, but I think are really dedicated to seeing some really breakthrough opportunities. And so our expectations are very high given the nature of this mission as well as the extraordinary competence of this crew and their persistence and their ability to really work through a number of details and issues as well. And it's a very historic international flight. Our first opportunity to fly with an Israeli astronaut who we're very proud of. Colonel Ramon is a peer of the astronaut corps of exactly the caliber of each of the really remarkable people we have within the U.S. astronaut corps, and he's a very welcome and extremely proficient addition to the astronaut corps we see internationally. He has a number of very important experiments he's doing on behalf of the Israeli science agenda, which we will be supporting as well, and he'll be participating in a number of our own. So it's quite an extraordinary group and one that we're very impressed with the manner in which it was done. But again, a historic moment too in the sense that there is a very different disposition that we feel today, and it couldn't have been a more picture-perfect launch, flawless in its character. On the very first one of this magnificent new year. So we've got a lot of things going on during the course of this year, a very ambitious launch schedule. It's great to start off exactly this way. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much.
We're ready for questions. We'll start with Jay Barbary.
Mr. O'Keefe, I'm Jay Barbary
Hi,
of
Jay. Nice to see
NBC.
you.
Good to see you, sir. I understand you have some studies going on existing contracts, and I'm told that you're going to break up the Consolidated Space Operations Contract. And I'm just wondering, do you have any plans or are you thinking about breaking up the spaceflight operations contract?
Mm-hmm. Well, on the Consolidated Space Operations Contract, I think last fall, we announced as how the performance on the part, I think, of the contract team that's been involved in has been exemplary. It was very well done. What we're looking for and the approach that we're going to use with this particular procurement methodology is an intention to motivate a very clear specificity on the part of the consumers, the users, the customers, if you will, of the launch service requirements, which would be the space science, earth science, biological and physical research, as well as our space flight communities that are engaged in it. So they have to be very much more specific with it, and the contract methodology we're trying to create puts a greater responsibility on the part of those who are demanding the operational support that would come from such activities. So it's no reflection at all on the industry side. It's more of a self-policing disciplinary approach that we're using that will be an effort to make sure that there is an origin of where the demand arises for the operational requirements. A little different in the spaceflight operations side, and it's one that we're certainly looking at. The results of the RAND study report that came out several months ago. There are a number of different very ambitious approaches that they've recommended. The circumstances under which the market have changed since the time I think they were first commissioned to look at this is dramatic. The anticipation that there would be a booming commercial market and so forth is certainly not materialized. So the notion that there would be a complete privatization approach to this I think is one we're looking at very seriously as to whether or not that really has the market traction that would be necessary in order to sustain it. But yeah, we're looking at lots of permutations. We're certainly looking at who and which companies would be proficient in this activity. and again, are very, very impressed with the continuing operations of the extant contract community, USA principally, in their performance, and again, demonstrated just yet again today of what an exemplary job they do, and a very strong commitment to safety of operations.
So the bottom line is this is something that you're looking at, you're studying, but you haven't made a decision on it.
Yes, sir.
I believe they have 2 more years.
CSOC we have, yes.
Yes, I understand.
Right.
But I believe they have 2 more years to go on the space flight operations contract, or
It
just got
is-
an extension of that much or something.
Expires in September of '04. Yes, sir. So we've got time here in the coming months. In the coming months, we'll make a determination on how we need to proceed, because if you're going to go forward with a competitive effort, you really have to give everybody notice and an opportunity to work it through. So we're going to do that in the next several months and be diligent about it and determine what we have to do in order to move ahead.
How are we doing on increasing the size of the crew on board the International Space Station?
The science and research requirements for International Space Station will dictate the size, ultimately, of what the crew contingent needs to be. I think we've made remarkable progress in working with our international partners, as recently as the head of agency meeting in Tokyo in December, at determining precisely what the science and research agenda would need to be to meet the requirements for any crew size or number. And so we have agreed, and I think are in very strong coordination of this particular question, that over the course of this next year, we're going to look at what the ultimate configuration options may be, and that in turn will inform us about what the crew size needs to be in order to support that. So I'll let that requirement process of the science and research agenda drive this rather than picking a favorite number. Yes, sir, please.
Wait for the mic if you
Oh,
would.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I'm Natan Gutman from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. After the successful launch of Colonel Ilan Ramon today, how do you see the future of the cooperation between NASA and the Israeli Space Agency? And do you think we can expect to see another Israeli astronaut in the future?
Well, the cooperation has been magnificent. I think the course of the last couple of years, certainly the head of the Israeli Space Agency is here and was a member of the team that was witnessed the event today, as well as a very important and I think extremely dedicated contingent of folks who are dedicated to the space exploration objectives that the Israeli Space Agency would be pursuing. And so, yeah, we've worked a number of different cooperative arrangements. Again, could not be more impressed with Colonel Ramon's capacity and his extraordinary proficiency. He is a real serious professional and a fellow who, more importantly than earning my or anybody else's respect, he has the respect of his peers who are astronauts, and they are really very much in admiration of his capacity. So, yes, we are most anxious to continue a strong and certain fruitful relationship as we move ahead.
Mike Cabbage.
How are you, Michael?
Fine, thank you, sir. Mike Cabbage with the Orlando Sentinel. I have a follow-up to Jay's question on your competitive sourcing efforts with the shuttle and the RAND study. What sort of milestones are coming up in the weeks and months ahead, and what's your time frame for starting to make some real decisions on
Oh,
that?
you know, again, very short, count them single-digit months, no more than one hand kind of thing. We really have to come to a determination pretty quick on what approach we're going to proceed with in order to give everybody ample time to really work through what the parameters are. I think part of what's going on is that we've got to examine, in addition to an assessment of performance, that's not what would be driving an issue of looking at any variation to the current contract. Performance today is exemplary. It's been very well achieved, and I think, again, the safety record that we see as well as the operational efficiency record has been most impressive. We continue to work in a very cooperative and very collegial relationship from the public and USA as a very professional contractual matter, determine where we can improve performance. So that's not the thing that would drive it. I think it's more a case of what are the parameters currently of what we anticipate from the spaceflight operations activity, and there are a number of other contributing factors. In addition to that which you see here, there are a lot of other variables that go into supporting it, as all of you are well aware. From the Marshall Space Flight Center, from Stennis Space Center, from the Johnson Space Center, there's all kinds of components that contribute to reaching a day like today, and an event like today. And it's while a lot of it's here and visible right here at Kennedy, there are a lot of other factors that go into this that there are variables that need to be considered. So really working through what the scope of work is, if you will, and what is the most efficient way to go about doing it. We're doing it in cooperation and collaboration with our partners at USA and determining what the best approach may be. So in the very short time ahead, I think you'll see some pretty crisp decision-making on that point.
When you talk about the different approaches, the RAND study was filled with ran the gamut as far as sort of different options. Do you have
with that assessment.
Do you have a general direction that you're leaning in at this point in time as far as some of the things that were in the study?
No.
Okay, Jerry Hannafin right next to Mike with his hand up.
Jerry Hannafin, Time Magazine. Mr. Administrator, there's been a spectacular series of nearly flawless or maybe flawless launches. And how do you propose to keep this great agency on its tippy toes in the future without getting a little bit complacent about these successes?
Well, I think, thank you. I appreciate the question, and I think the spirit of it as well, which really captures the culture of this agency quite well. There are not many people here, as we are within 2 weeks of observing the 17th anniversary of the tragedy on January 28th of Challenger. There are not many people in this agency who've forgotten about that. And again, even those of us who have not been with this agency for long, or even as far back as that period of time, all Americans, I would venture to say an awful lot of people around the globe, remember where they were that day. And it really had a searing effect on all of us. And it's one that I think has changed forever, the approach that this agency, that those who have committed themselves to exploring on behalf of the American people have realized that you do that without being reckless, and do it in a way that's responsible and that absolutely respects the fact that there are people involved in this. I just left a few moments ago the opportunity to visit with the families of each of the crew members, their kids, wives, husbands, all of them who were there. And every opportunity, I'm making a point to do that with every flight, just to remind you that they're real folks that are attached to this. These are people who really depend on everybody that's engaged in this. And so, if nothing else, it's a representation of the ethos of this agency, and I don't see this becoming a case of withdrawing from that. And I don't think it's ever going to get to a stage where anybody becomes complacent, because it is a case where you really can put a name, face, and a personality in human beings behind the consequences of what we do every day, and we're all very, very mindful of that. And thank God we are. That's the right way to do it. I'm very, very proud and very impressed with how the spaceflight team handles every operation. It's really, really awe-inspiring.
Stephen Young.
Stephen Young with spaceflightnow.com. I'm wondering what your New Year's resolutions are as far as the space agency. What do you see as your biggest challenges? What do you want to accomplish this year?
Be focused, be selective about what we do it as well as we can possibly imagine doing so, and really demonstrate our expertise and prowess of the things we do exceptionally well, and do no harm. Those would be my resolutions.
Okay. Let's go to the front row. Someone's had their hand up a while here.
Brendanette Mason for Orlando Television. What criteria was used in choosing the experiments for this mission?
Geez. It was, it withstood the test of time. It was really a long, drawn-out process. And again, the importance of what's aboard this flight, and again, the proficiency and expertise of this crew is just over the top. Is not a reflection, the fact that it's moved on the schedule so much, is not a reflection of how significant we think the experimentation is. It is more a reflection that on each of the other flights that deal specifically with International Space Station, that there are people involved, there are crew members aboard, that there's a rotational schedule or whatever else that's planned. And so, as a consequence, the schedule has slipped several times for this flight as a result of the priority of making sure humans who are permanently aboard the International Space Station are supported the best way we know how to. And so we've always viewed this as an important set of scientific objectives. That said, there was a wide range of criteria that was employed here. The first one was in looking at physical sciences and material sciences particularly. biological effects in the first case as well as material and engineering effects in the other, was to look at what we can do in this really compacted period of time of 16 days to contribute to what we refer to as the human effects and human endurance challenges that the astronaut corps approach. We've got to remind ourselves that we are just a little over 2 years into the business of a permanent presence in space in which we're looking at U.S. experience. Russians certainly have had much more for longer duration space flights, but U.S. experience of 4-6 months. This is our first real circumstance of doing that. And so we're now seeing on our 6th expedition crew longer duration space flights, and as a result there are factors that weigh into that. They're wholly different than what we've seen from the normal 16 to 17, 18-day shuttle flight result. And the consequences in the form of bone mass, muscle mass, radiation effects, all those things that are very different and more intensive. And so part of what this experimentation is going to do is focus on that set of biological and physiological effects. That was the first criteria. Second one thereafter was looking at a number of material sciences kind of approaches to things and some aerospace engineering principles that we were looking to see demonstrated, for which those engineering experiments and research objectives were really ranked fairly high in that case. And there was a series of commercial payloads dealing with, again, more on the biological side, a number of cancer research experiments and projects that were engaged as well. And then for any of the space that was left over, the nooks and crannies and the getaway specials, we made sure that any student who had an opportunity to be persistent and wanted to stick with it, that we put 11, I think, different student experiments in every corner of the cargo bay we could find. So we made maximum use, mileage, and capacity out of the space available on this flight.
Okay, we have one over here.
Mr. O'Keefe, Noam Karen for the Israeli Air Force magazine.
Sure.
NASA spent many years and a large amount of money in training and now launching the Israeli astronaut. The benefits for Israel are more clear to me, but can you elaborate a little bit on the payoff for NASA from all of this?
Well, again, it's the international dimension of our activities. You constantly get a different way of looking at problems. And given the amount of energy and time that I think the Israeli Space Agency and the scientific community in Israel have spent on some very specific earth sciences, principally related activities, we see things in a different way. As a consequence, that truly is the definition of diversity in my mind, is you get a different way of looking at a problem. And so in that regard, it's very, very powerful. Second dimension in the case of Colonel Ramon is just his proficiency. I mean, the guy's an accomplished aviator. He's a peerless flyer, pilot of his own right. And so as a consequence, there's an awful lot that I think our folks in the astronaut corps benefit by the continuing expertise of someone with his not only credentials but tremendous expertise. So, oh yeah, we're just delighted. He's a great contributor, and we're very, very pleased to have a strong cooperative relationship there.
On the other side of the room, Dan Billow.
Dan Billow from Wesh TV.
Hi, Dan.
Morning or afternoon. Just looking for a kind of a status on the cost of Space Station Alpha. What's the total cost of the space station, and how much is it over budget?
I assure you, you can ask my wife anytime. I haven't beaten her, no. That's what the nature of that question sounds like. How much over budget is it? Relative to what? I mean, part of what the challenge is with this particular question and issue is that we've always judged this based on some baseline that isn't stated. And so as a result, the thing that drives what the cost is going to be is what the configuration you ultimately select will look like. And what I can tell you is relative to the core configuration that the United States is committed to doing, and I can tell you with absolute planning certainty, when thereafter was looking at a number of material sciences kind of approaches to things and some aerospace engineering principles that we were looking to see demonstrated, for which those engineering experiments and research objectives were really ranked fairly high in that case. And there was a series of commercial payloads dealing with, again, more on the biological side, a number of cancer research experiments and projects that were engaged as well. And then for any of the space that was left over, the nooks and crannies and the getaway specials, we made sure that any student who had an opportunity to be persistent and wanted to stick with it, that we put 11, I think, different student experiments in every corner of the the cargo bay we could find. So we made maximum use, mileage, and capacity out of the space available on this flight.
Okay, we have one over here.
Mr. O'Keefe, Noam Karen for the Israeli Air Force magazine.
Sure.
NASA spent many years and a large amount of money in training and now launching the Israeli astronaut. The benefits for Israel are more clear to me, but can you elaborate a little bit on the payoff for NASA from all of this?
Well, again, it's the international dimension of our activities. You constantly get a different way of looking at problems. And given the amount of energy and time that I think the Israeli Space Agency and the scientific community in Israel have spent on some very specific earth sciences, principally related activities, we see things in a different way. As a consequence, that truly is the definition of diversity in my mind, is you get a different way of looking at a problem. And so in that regard, it's very, very powerful. Second dimension in the case of Colonel Ramon is just his proficiency. I mean, the guy's an accomplished aviator. He's a peerless flyer, pilot of his own right. And so as a consequence, there's an awful lot that I think our folks in the astronaut corps benefit by the continuing expertise of someone with his not only credentials but tremendous expertise. So, oh yeah, we're just delighted. He's a great contributor, and we're very, very pleased to have a strong cooperative relationship there.
On the other side of the room, Dan Billow.
Dan Billow from West TV.
Hi, Dan.
Morning, afternoon. Just looking for a kind of a status on the cost of Space Station Alpha. What's the total cost of the space station, and how much is it over budget?
I assure you, you can ask my wife anytime. I haven't beaten her, no. That's what the nature of that question sounds like. How much over budget is it? Relative to what? I mean, part of what the challenge is with this particular question and issue is that we've always judged this based on some baseline that isn't stated. And so as a result, the thing that drives what the cost is going to be is what the configuration you ultimately select will look like. And what I can tell you is relative to the core configuration that the United States is committed to doing, and I can tell you with absolute planning certainty that the date we will declare the core configuration of having been completed is when the STS-120 mission flies that will deliver the Node 2, which is the compartment and module that makes the attachment for every other module possible. And for the Columbus module, the GEM module, the Japanese are contributing, et cetera, the centrifuge, all these different pieces then become feasible after that point. At the stage in which we reach that, on or about, and we are planning right now for February the 19th, 2004, it's a date emblazed in everybody's mind on what we're really driving towards, and a very ambitious launch schedule between now and then. That relative to that configuration, because anything beyond that is purely speculative. We're looking at something that is on the order of magnitude of $23.5 to $24 billion is what we've invested in it to date. Through that time, through the period it will take in order to reach that configuration. So I think it's critically important that we always calibrate this relative to what it is you want to measure it from. And unfortunately, that level of discipline hasn't been occurring. And folks, measure it based on whatever they think the configuration ought to be without articulating what it is. So that in that context, we are, I think we have adequately budgeted for what is necessary, the resources that have to be dedicated to the task to continue to build out this amazing laboratory capacity. And that's the ultimate dollar amount that we're looking at this stage of what it will take to achieve the stated objective I just outlined.
We have just a few more minutes. Let's go with Phil Chin.
Hi, Phil.
Phil Chin, Earth News. Hi,
Nice to
Sean.
see
Sorry if this has already been approached. Maybe I can get a different answer out of you if it was. What do you see as the future involvement of the U.S. and Israel together in space?
I think very productive. I think it's time ahead will yield, I think, what future cooperative and collaborative arrangements we can continue on. It's been a great start and one that we are most anxious to continue along. It's been very productive and very fruitful for all of us.
And we have time for one more question. Randy's had his hand up a long time.
Randy Avera, Randolph Publishing. Today we saw a 22-year-old orbiter fly very well into orbit. What is NASA's plan for possible replacement or construction of new orbiters to support the future launch schedules?
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Well, it's two things. First of all, the range and age of the orbiters is one thing. There's no question. The oldest of the orbiters, Columbia, flew today. Man, it was impressive, wasn't it? And the other three are varying degrees of younger by several years, the most recent of which, Endeavour, was delivered in 1992. So it's 10 years old, a little more than that. And the flight rate on each of these has been roughly 25% on average of what has been the intended service life of each of those assets. So look at it this way. It's a yesterday or older technology vehicle on a very low mileage frame, okay? And these are incredibly durable assets. They have withstood a lot of things, and every time you go through the cycle of an orbiter major modification, which is now being done here at Kennedy, Discovery is going through it right now. It's an 18-month-long process. It essentially tears down the entire orbiter and rebuilds it. So these things are almost as new condition by the time they come out of a major modification schedule. And they're flying at very low stress rates at this juncture. We aren't flying them nearly as rapidly as we thought we would when they were designed. So what we've come to is the objective of saying we ought to really utilize that asset in a way that would be really more compatible with what was intended to do, which is heavy lift, cargo, transport capacity, and to look at upgrades and continuing improvements to orbiter in order to get the maximum kind of service life that we can out of it easily into the next decade. So the notion that we're going to shut it off and turn off the asset at some magic date is one that we're now rethinking a lot and have rethought. We are not going to pick an arbitrary date and say that's it, we're going to close up shop on this particular juncture. It's got a lot of mileage left on it. It's in great shape and one that we want to really work very hard in order to get the maximum capability out of it. So in the next couple of months, we're really working with a lot of folks engaged in this, the industry as well as internals in NASA, to try to come up with a very clear prioritization set of what are the appropriate upgrades and modifications and so forth that are necessary in order to infuse and bring in modern technology into each of the orbiters themselves, and to raise the reliability, improve the safety margins, mitigate the risk, do all the things that are necessary. Because now we've been achieving that at a fairly regular rate now on a number of the modifications. We want to do it in a more concerted way. As a second order of magnitude is looking at the orbital space plane, which is part of what was announced when the President sent forward the amendment in November of 2002 to the fiscal year 2003 budget, which the Congress is now acting on now. And the objective of looking at the orbital space plane is to build an asset that will not be a technological leap of faith, that can be done based on what we think are ambitious uses of known technology that get over some of the operational limitations that are inherent in orbiter, which is maneuverability, flexibility, launch on as close to on demand as you can make it, certainly not like it is right now. I mean, it takes minimum 29 days to roll these extraordinary pieces of machinery out at the blazing speed of 1 mile an hour, all the way to the launch pad. And you got to set it up about a month in advance, and that's really an incredibly specific set of parameters that really have to be met in order to do that safely, make it work right. We've got to be able to have the capacity in order to do launch a little closer to that, to be primarily a crew transfer vehicle and crew transport capability to International Space Station and other capabilities. It's maneuverable, that has the capacity to have in-space propulsion capabilities that get over the literal 1 degree of separation kind of issues that are currently, technology limiters on orbiter. Because it was designed to be a heavy lift cargo capacity asset, and we want to use it for that purpose supplement it with the capability to have a more flexible, dynamic, maneuverable asset that can meet those other deficiencies as well. So both of those things are what we're on a track for, and looking to insert those upgrades here during the course of this decade and produce an orbital space plane, hopefully by the end of this decade, that will supplement the capabilities for a more flexible asset for crew transfer capabilities to station.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you all
And,
very much for being here. Appreciate it.
our next briefing will start momentarily. Please stand by.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.